So I was talking to you. Welcome aboard, by the way, Mr. Rick Manning, President, Americans for Limited Government, who is here with me on Mondays regularly and has been with me for many years now. And I'm grateful for his friendship and participation in the program. So I was talking to you about, I sent you an email about this, that it just, it's just another one of these radical steps created by the insane Department of Justice, and this particular one has specifically to do with a brand new red flag law operation that the Department of Justice is going to be running using every spy tool the U.S. government has in order to violate Americans' Second Amendment rights. That is a quote from Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Right. Well, it's not surprising. What's really not surprising is, the left, Biden administration has created a crisis. We have criminals coming across the border on a daily basis being sent into our cities. We have the cartels putting their soldiers into our cities to sell drugs and distribute drugs. We have an existing infrastructure of people who sell drugs and are defending their territory. So you get a lot more murders. And the net result is, by the way, you have DAs who won't prosecute criminals. You have states which won't extradite and send away, allow them to be deported, criminals who've come in the country from other countries. And so you've created a basically the perfect storm for an increase in violence and people just going into stores and just stealing things without having any repercussions whatsoever. We've had illegal immigrants kicking police officers in New York City on the streets in New York City, gathering around them and kicking them. Only one of those people actually was arrested, from what I understand, and everybody got out. So we're looking at a police force that is overwhelmed, undermanned, and have been beaten down to the point where they're really afraid to do anything because the city councils have decided that the police are the bad guys and the people who are stealing stuff and killing people are the good guys. So now the Biden administration, they won't deal with that. We all know that happened. They won't deal with that. But their solution is, let's really crack down on red flag laws and let's take away the guns of people who are Trump supporters.
So let me give a little bit of more background on this and then have you speak to it some more. But so the Department of Justice announced on March 23rd that it had launched the National Extreme Risk Protection Order, ERPO, Resource Center, a training and technical assistance hub that it says is meant to support states and localities in the implementation of their red flag laws, which have long been, of course, controversial. We believe they're controversial, but this is an effort specifically to go after, and this is kind of the non-descriptive part in it that's most dangerous. Their target is going to be gun owners whom this current Department of Justice, FBI, CIA, EPA, the FTC, whoever, the alphabet soup. It's who they believe to be a threat to them. And there's a scenario in this story that I wanted to bring up, and again, then I'm going to throw it right back to you, Rick. And that was about a make-believe guy who's at home eating with his family, and they use flashbang bombs to come through the door, and and in the process, they shoot and kill him. And if someone was not read up or didn't understand this situation, they may assume that this is just a make-believe fictional narrative. But the reality, Rick, is this has already happened. And the victims' names are Vicky and Samuel Weaver. Samuel was a 13-year-old boy. Vicky was the mother of a 10-month-old whom she was holding in her arms when a sniper took her head off with a sniper bullet. All over a bench warrant having to do with an unlawful attempt to seize firearms from a constitutionalist, Bible-believing, God-fearing man who posed no threat whatsoever.
No, that's absolutely correct. I was actually working at the NRA when that happened about 20, 30 years ago. Randy Weaver, Vicky Weaver happened at Ruby Ridge, Idaho. And that's an absolute exactly what happened. And so this isn't far-fetched. This is we know this has happened in the past. Those of us who remember Branch Davidians, and we saw what happened with Branch Davidians.
Yep.
So that was all over supposedly having illegal firearms. What people weren't ever told about that was the FBI had somebody who was on the inside who wasn't able to find any violations, and so they weren't able to just deal with it. The Waco sheriff at the time was asked after the fact and said, well, if they'd come to me, David Koresh comes into town every single week at the same time to pick up groceries, and you could have just apprehended him at that point. But no, it happened. Both of these incidents happened.
No, they had the guns locked up in an armory on the property behind lock and key where no one could get to them, where there was no danger, where children didn't have access. But they made up all of these propagandistic stories. And then it was, well, he's a cult leader and he's a this and he's a that. Look, there is such a thing as freedom of religion. And I've never read a story, not one, maybe the New Mexico, where they had the kids that they were teaching, that the Islamists were literally teaching how to shoot, and they had documentation of them planning to go into their schools and kill non-Muslim children. But other than that, I've never heard of one situation where the government went into one of those Islamic. As a matter of fact, up in Michigan, they still exist. They're called no-go zones.
Right. Well, we know that this has been a historic problem, but here's where the red flag law piece of it makes it worse, dramatically worse. It's an escalation. The red flag laws have been put into place by some local municipalities and some states under a promise that they're only going to be used for people who are a danger to themselves or others but the key to it is all you have to do is have an allegation. You do not have to have any proof. You don't have to have anything but somebody saying, a relative calling in and saying, or a estranged wife calling in and saying, hey, I know he has a lot of guns and I'm fearful. At which point the government the court will say, oh, well, this is a red flag law. We can go knock on the door at 5 a.m. and rouse the person, steal their guns, and under the protection of the community. And then good luck for the guy who was never had a day in court, never was able to confront his accuser, ever getting his guns back. And hopefully he lives through the circumstance. In Annapolis, Maryland, when this was first enacted in Maryland, the police arrived at one gentleman's door who came out, and they were confronting him. He went back inside, and they came busting in. He defended himself, and he ended up dying.
Yep.
On the one that the left will remember, I think most of us remember her name, about the person who was killed down in Atlanta, Georgia, and everybody was talking about the police, the SWAT team breaking into the house, and there being an exchange of gunfire, and her dying. Well, that was an exact kind of circumstance where, you had a decision that you were going to have a confrontational approach, and in this case, they were both drug dealers, but the fact of the matter is, you have a situation where with a red flag law, you're treated like a drug dealer. You don't have any rights under red flag laws. And what the federal government is doing is they're now going to say, oh, we're going to expand who's covered under this to people we think are a threat. You don't
Right.
have to have a loved one who says, gee, I'm afraid this person's going to commit suicide,
Right.
which was how it was justified. No, now it's been expanded to exactly where we knew it would go. And that is that the federal government is now going to say, we're going to identify threats, people who we don't like, and people who we think might be dangerous in some way, shape, or form. And we're going to subject them to this kind of basically abuse of both their property and their lives.
Well, and bear in mind that they've been building this database, Rick. They've been building this database. They built this database under Obama. We know from documents and from FOIA requests that have been made by Robert Spencer, also by Tom Fitton, also by Larry Klayman. We know that they have been putting these lists together, and in reality, quite frankly, the mechanisms for this go all the way back to the Clinton administration.
Well, actually, the mechanisms go all the way back to the Gun Control Act of '68.
Well,
because
sure.
one of the ways they're compiling the lists is when you fill out your paperwork to be able to buy a gun, and that's sitting in the back, back storeroom at the gun shop.
Yeah.
If that gun shop goes out of business, the BATF, Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, takes that paperwork, and they're supposed to store it, but they're not supposed to do anything with it. The only reason that paperwork exists is so you can trace a gun used in a crime. Okay, so it's stored, and then under Biden, what they started doing is they started going through those old files and basically recording them. Every single person who bought a gun that was in one of those gun shops that went out of business, they put them all in a computerized database directly against the law, by the way, which prevents that, or supposed to prevent that. So so they've been putting a registration list of people who own guns and have been doing so aggressively. And trust me when I tell you this, they're not putting a registration list together for any reason other than to facilitate confiscation. And all they have to do is say, oh, I think you own too many guns. And they could deem that to be reason that you're a danger to society, or you have too much ammunition. That could be a danger to society. And as a result, they are setting this in motion to be able to do that kind of thing. It is dangerous, but I would expect nothing less from this administration. Oh, by the way, the other piece of this puzzle is illegal. They're arguing in court that illegal aliens should be able to have the right to bear arms, keep and bear arms. So they're arguing for illegal aliens having the right to keep and bear arms, and arguing against citizens, law-abiding citizens, having that same right. It is absolutely upside down world, but that's what the Biden administration Justice Department is doing, and it is dangerous. And trust me when I say, they're not doing this just because they're curious. They're doing this because they have an intent to use it, and the reason to start complaining to your members of Congress right now about it is because, truthfully, if your members of Congress aren't screaming at them about this, they will just continue with impunity to do this, and the first people they take out will be people who they can justify for some reason. But this is a consolidation of the CIA, the FBI, the alcohol, ATF, all the different intelligence agencies, and putting all of their powers together and doing a composite person based on a lot of data. And then anybody who fits that composite is going to be in trouble. And that's what they're doing. The question is, will Congress allow it? And quite honestly, will there be enough pushback that causes them to think twice about actually utilizing what they're putting together?
Well, there were two issues where you had Liberty Safe, who came under fire for having given up the codes to gun safes of individuals that bought safes from them. But then there was a Dayton-based company called Polymer 80 who said, we're not playing along. And then there was also Pratchard Manufacturing, or Pratchard, a man who manufactured who built his own weapons, which, by the way, you are legally allowed to do that. You are legally allowed to build your own weapons, but of course the ATF, again, they don't want that. That's why they were going after particular pieces, because if they could just take one piece off the market and say, this, you can't have this piece, knowing that you had to have all of those pieces in order to create it. Right. So if they could just take one piece away and say it's illegal to have this one piece, now they can eliminate the ability of individuals to be able to. And you know, I've had Gun Owners of America on multiple times. Larry Pratt used to come on this program regularly. You know, Larry. Right. And you know, again, it's so important to understand our Second Amendment was not created for home defense. Our Second Amendment was created by a government that had just fought the most powerful government in the world in Great Britain, and they wanted our people to be able to defend themselves in case this newly formed government decided to go rogue. I don't know, kind of sort of like the one we have.
Well, and what's more, and I know we're not supposed to say anything about anything that happened to the founding fathers, but you know, the first battle of the Revolutionary War was Lexington and Concord. And we know Midnight Ride of Paul Revere and all that stuff. Well, what people generally don't know is the Brits were going to Lexington and Concord to capture the powder storage, powder, black powder that was used to fire guns.
Hello.
They were actually going to confiscate the ability to have guns and use guns. And that's what the first battle of two battles of the Revolutionary War were directly over. Are you going to go and take our guns and our black powder and make it so we're defenseless? And the people of Lexington and Concord said no. And a lot of redcoats got to discover that the coats got a lot more red after finding out that those guns worked and people knew how to shoot them.
Yeah.
So be clear. The Second Amendment is rooted in the first two battles of the Revolutionary War, which happened, by the way, before the Declaration of Independence was signed. So that is a historical fact, and one that can't be forgotten. I also have to say, though, it's not surprising to me that the left, they always use gun control as their excuse to want to deal with a crime problem they created. And they have created mayhem on many of our streets between the homeless populations and the illegal populations and the criminal populations we've imported and domestic. Mm-hmm. We have they've created mayhem in the streets of many of our cities. They've made it so companies like a number of pharmacies have had to close their stores. A number of retailers have closed their stores in major cities like San Francisco and LA because of the crime being so bad that there's no way they can justify having their store in those locations. And so what we have right now is a determined, planned assault on our legal system and the right to property. And under the guise that, they're insured, so it's okay to burn down the building or it's okay to steal all this stuff. They're insured. And so that's what this is. It's an outright attempt to take away the ability to have property by making the government not protect property ownership. That's part of this play that they're doing. And only somebody who doesn't believe in private property would do this. So it is a dangerous road they're going down. This expansion of the red flag laws and the enforcement of the red flag laws to include anybody they don't like is one of the more dangerous things I've seen. And quite honestly, I think what they're trying to invoke some kind of violent confrontation to justify taking other actions that are even more extreme.
Well, Harrison Butker, who was the kicker for the Kansas City Chiefs, was asked about his response to the shooting that took place afterwards, and I thought his response was beautiful because he really nailed the problem. He said the problem's not guns. The problem is bad parenting. The problem is you need a father and a mother in the home that are parenting their children, that are teaching them right from wrong, that don't let them get away with this criminal kind of behavior. That at the end of the day, that's the bottom line. And we know that the Democrats have for many years done everything that they can to destroy the family structure and destroy the family nucleus. And that is what is destroying our country.
There's no doubt. And, Harrison, but one thing we know for certain is the kicker for the Kansas City Chiefs is not going to be asked anything about anything ever again, except for if he misses the field goal. Okay, because he didn't give the programmed response that they'd hoped for. But he told truth, and that's an important thing. You notice, and it's not hard to notice, that a shooting at the Super Bowl parade, pretty big deal. And you notice how fast that went off the air once the facts around the shooting came out, that it was a couple of stupid gangbangers who started shooting at each other and caused and killed a bunch of people. And it's that didn't fit the narrative. And since it didn't fit the narrative, the story went away. So just know that it's, the problem that we have, this is the typical, I dealt with them when I was in NRA. They create a problem by creating laws that make it so people don't go to jail and commit crimes. Then they go and when the crime rate goes up, then they say the crime rate's going up. Oh my gosh, we have to ban guns. And some days it's Saturday night specials and handguns. Other days it's rifles, it's semi-autos. But the fact of the matter is the song's the same no matter which type of gun it is. They're trying to eliminate and ban classes of guns. And fortunately, the Supreme Court that Donald Trump helped create has made it so they no longer have the capacity to do that, at least not legally. And it will be interesting if the court will take up the red flag laws if they get to the court in terms of its the implementation in light of the federal government's actions,
right,
that are not authorized by Congress.
Hear, hear.